And I kept going back to the doctors, back and forth. And then finally, they didn't know how to help me, really. So one of them said, have you tried cold showers? So that was information. And I didn't want to get in the cold shower, and I live on the coast. So I thought I'll just get in the sea in the winter. And straight away that worked.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Josh Bennett, and these are Transnatural Perspectives. This is the show where we bring you global perspectives on society and culture across environments and landscapes so that you can keep nature in focus in wherever you are and whatever you do. I'm recording live here from Oslo, Norway, and if this is your first time joining us, please make sure that you subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening or wherever you're watching. And plus, don't forget you can follow us on social media pretty much everywhere now at Transnatural Pod. That's at symbol, all one word, Transnatural Pod. It's also much appreciated if you can share this podcast wherever possible. It really is the best way to support the show and spread our message of sustainability, nature connectedness, and environmental awareness all around the globe. I think we are in almost 40 countries now. It's really amazing. Anyways, stop bragging. Now, on with the show. So chances are you've been swimming in wild places, wild places like rivers, waterfalls, beaches, mountain lakes, maybe city park lakes, who knows? And chances are if you've ever gone swimming outside a pool, then the answer is yes. But what about ice cold water? What about in the middle of winter? What about a time like right now here in November? Some of you might say, oh yeah, well, I've done the polar plunge a time or two, but what if I told you that our guest today is a professional cold water swimmer? That's right, Laura Owen Sanderson has found a way to combine her love for cold water, wild swimming, and environmental conservation. Laura is the founder of We Swim Wild, a nonprofit organization and campaigning body that inspires, unites, and empowers wild swimming communities and water users to take action against microplastic pollution and other silent contaminants. As you're going to hear, Laura stopped by the virtual studio to share her story of how wild, cold water swimming changed her life, taking her from the pain of chronic illness to becoming an advocate for water conservation and her current mission of swimming across all 15 national parks in the UK. While organizing over 100 volunteers to conduct the largest citizen science water research project ever conducted in the country, we can see that Laura's story is one that shows the healing power of nature connectedness. Make sure you stick around because later on in the show, Laura's also going to give us some tips on how we can prepare for our own cold water wild swimming experience. So enjoy, everybody, and see you on the other side for some reflections. And I'm really excited because we have special guests. Oh, they're all special guests, but we have a special guest on the show today, all the way from the UK, that's United Kingdom, for anybody that's not familiar with these abbreviations. We have Laura Sanderson. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Laura. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, good, thank you. We're over in Wales, in Snowdonia.
Over in Snowdonia. And okay, I should have given you a more proper introduction because the reason why we're having Laura on the show today is because, I don't know, I can't imagine any person I've heard of, and I could be wrong, but that is more of an advocate for wild swimming than Laura. And I first came to know you from this film, this very beautifully shot film that I've seen on Vimeo, YouTube, somewhere out there on the internet, called Hydrotherapy. And it's this beautifully shot film of you swimming out in the wilderness and talking about your story about how you got into wild swimming and cold water swimming. And I myself love to go swimming, and it just made me want to go swimming so much in the cold water. And then I thought, okay, I need to learn more about this before I start doing that. Can you tell us a little bit about what your connection with wild swimming and what is wild swimming? And a lot of people are afraid to get in cold water and stuff like that. So yeah, how did this all get started?
I'd always been a fair weather swimmer, just, when it's sunny, getting in the water. But I'd actually got ill, and that's how I started swimming through winter. So I'd had an accident. I ended up in A&E, which is what that film's about, really. So I almost died. And when I got better, I started to suffer with fibromyalgia, which is when your muscles are really stiff. And you felt like it was 100. So I went from being really fit to being like hardly being able to walk across the room for a while. And I kept going back to the doctors back and forth. And then finally they didn't know how to help me really. So one of them said, have you tried cold showers to help with inflammation? And I didn't want to get in the cold shower, and I live on the coast. So I thought I'll just get in the sea in the winter. And straight away that worked. I think it's the salt in the water, but it just really eased up the muscles. And then because we're stuck with kind of coastal tides, I started to venture out more into the mountains, like the mountain lakes and rivers. And it's quite addictive. Once you start, you get quite addicted to it, I think.
Wow. Yeah, that's actually what I've heard. Over here in Oslo, it's also become kind of a trend recently because we have a lot of floating saunas on the fjord. And I don't know if you've ever been to Oslo, but of course you can imagine it's quite cold in the water here too. And so recently there's been a lot more people swimming, I guess you could say kind of wild, but urban wilderness of the Oslo fjord. But I have seen this lady, and some of the people that I know that are really into it, of course I go there sometimes too to the sauna, say that what you just said, it gets kind of addicting. Which I think sounds probably crazy for a lot of people because they say, oh, God, I never want to, a lot of fair weather swimmers out there. Oh, I would never want to go jump in the freezing cold water, but it gets addicting. What about it? Can you,
even I sometimes don't want to get in when I go up a mountain, but you never regret getting in ever. Especially people like in Norway and over here, we're not blessed with warm water. So you're going to work with what you've got. But once you go in, you get like a hit afterwards, like the afterglow. With the endorphin rush. So I think that's the bit that's probably quite addictive. And it's quite refreshing to get into cool water, and it completely takes your mind off anything else because you're just thinking about, I guess, like surviving in that moment. But yeah, it's really, I recommend everybody does it at least once.
Yeah, I can say and also I come from a very warm water place. I'm from Florida originally. So my growing up outdoor experience is very much in this always fair weather swimming conditions. But I've experienced that myself where I think you're right. You get this endorphin rush afterwards and you feel refreshed. And even in that moment, I don't know, we could say maybe it's a bit, I almost feel like it's like almost an instant meditation. To jump in, and then, you're just focused on, oh, my heartbeat. Oh, it's so cold. Oh, and then it feels kind of good. I'm just curious too, you said a couple of terms in there that I'm not so sure everybody's familiar with. So when you first came to this wild swimming, it was kind of because of health reasons, like immediate health reasons. You said A&E, is that an intensive care or something like that?
That's just the emergency.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's the emergency room for all of you people that don't live in the UK. Yeah. And then you said you came up with fibromyalgia.
Yeah. Afterwards, I'd had like a lot of blood transfusions, and the knock-on effect was that, for example, like a month after, all my nails fell off my toes and my feet because my body had gone into shock. Apparently, thought it'd died.
Wow.
And then fibromyalgia, it's I'd never been ill before, so it was a shock, but it'd gone from 0 to 1,000 to 0. It's like inflamed muscles, and you can't hardly move them. You feel like you're 100 and you can't even walk. It's like just getting out of bed was really difficult. So I kept going back to find out, what they could do to fix it, and they didn't really know themselves. So I think it was a student doctor actually, just said, "Have you tried cold showers or cold baths?" And that's never appealed to me. Even now, I know the Wim Hof method. They do a challenge so you can get used to cold water, but standing in a cold shower is not on my list of favorite things to do. I don't know about you.
Okay, so cold swimming, but still warm showers.
yeah. I think I'm two extremes, but I think it's like more holistic. Just the whole, you're out in the environment, and you're freezing cold, but you've got a beautiful landscape to look at. It's not like standing in a ceramic tiled bathroom, is it? Just staring at a tile. So definitely. If you've tried cold showers, it's not worked for you, definitely try it outdoor swimming.
And how about before all of this happened? Were you quite an outdoors person, like it seems you are today, or was
And not as much. We live in the mountains and on the coast of Snowdonia, so I would go like hiking, but not majorly. When I was younger, tried like surfing. Used to surf a bit on the beaches, but not. I think I would say from mid-20s to mid-30s. I'm 38 now. I don't think I really went out as much. I was completely consumed by work, actually.
Wow. And so this was kind of a life-changing health incident that really sent you into a stronger connection with like nature and your natural surroundings through the water.
Yeah, for sure. So I used to be in education and teaching. And yeah, I guess if anybody's listening that's a teacher, they'll know how all-consuming that is.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I guess I just worked. I'd come home, work. I'd travel like really far for my job. I'm a single parent, so I put the kids to bed. Then I'd work, and then I'd get up at 5 and do it all over again. And then I guess my body must have just given up, which is why I got ill.
Yeah, I think a lot of teachers out there can identify with that, especially if you're even if you're an outdoors teacher and you get to be outside all day. But if you're an indoor teacher, I know I've been there for many years being an indoor teacher. It is incredible the toll that takes on the human body.
Oh, for sure.
You know?
It's not sustainable, I don't think. You get rewarded for the more pressure you put on yourself. So I think the whole system is a bit flawed in that sense. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a whole other story. The sustainability of the teaching. So, but the moral of this story is that if you're a teacher out there, you could probably use some wild swimming, if you can, or some cold water swimming. Yeah. Rejuvenate your body. I'm curious a little bit before I move on, just, how I first found out about you is through this film Hydrotherapy, which is just a beautifully shot film. And it's a short film, just I think about 8 minutes long or something like that. But how did that film come about? And I suggest everybody goes out and checks this out.
Well, I have an Instagram account, my own Instagram account, Wild Welsh Swimmer. And they were looking for a swimmer who had a story or a background. So they find me on Instagram, really, and they're a really good film company called Friction Collective from Bristol. Mm-hmm. And they approached me and said, can we come and, film about your story? And I was a bit dubious at first. I don't really like being on camera. So I put it off. And then by the time they came, it was last December. And then they came back and filmed a bit in January this year. So it was when it was at its coldest, really. And we did it when it was a weather warning. It was tipping it down with rain. But the film looks quite beautiful, but it was actually freezing and then probably quite worse, for them with their camera kit and everything. It was quite intense.
Yeah, it is a really, I keep saying this, but it is a very beautifully shot film. Yeah. And it is amazing. So that was in January when this film was shot.
Filmed 3 or 4 days in late December, and then they came back in the first week of January or second week of January, and they filmed another 2 or 3 days.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Was this shot in the area where you live?
Yeah, so it's in Snowdonia. So I basically took them to some of my favorite swim spots.
Okay, so everybody, I know this is an audio podcast, so we can't watch the film right now, but go out and watch this film. This area, Snowdonia, so how far was this area that you went to go swimming? Because it looks very wild, like out in the middle of nowhere. So
it's a national park, Snowdonia National Park, but I live in Harlech on the beach, so you can drive 5-10 minutes and be at, a really beautiful waterfall, or you can go for a hike in the mountains for a bit longer. So it was all kind of around where I live, where I would go normally. We were limited with all the camera kit to go up to the really wild spots. Mm-hmm. But they managed to go up to Cumsillin, which is one of my favorites, which is it's only about a 40-minute hike, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so is that like a common swimming area for you?
Oh no, I hate I don't really like the popular swim spots because I go to get away from it all to reset. So for me, a swim spot filled with 20, 30 people is not my idea of relaxation. So, I don't recommend you go on your own, but I often just wander off on my own somewhere just for a bit of peace and quiet and to just relax, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas many people would want to go sit in like a jacuzzi tub or something like this. This is very, very amazing. What do you think? Have you seen some research behind this? And I know you're up to research too, but maybe a different kind of research. But is there any research that you found related to the human body and the benefits, explaining it further than just like, I know I feel good when I do that, but is there research behind that you've discovered?
There's lots of research being done at the moment on, for example, mental health and depression, because there's a lot of people who use it to combat signs of depression, but it's great you could look up Wim Hof and people like that. They say it's great for your immune system. Regularly, obviously, it's like going to the gym. You can't just go once and you need to go a couple of times a week. So it's great for your immune system. They say it's great for losing weight, but I don't know about that. I haven't really seen that as myself yet. But for me, it's more about the mindfulness. Cold water exposure there's lots of research been done into cold water exposure and how that's great for your body in general. But for me, it's about just switching off and having that time in just being outside anyway. It was great. But if you start swimming outside, you're sort of in the landscape. You're not just looking at it. So before I used to hike up and have a look, but you really feel like you're part of the kind of connected to the landscape when you're in the water, because you're in, like, especially in Snowdonia and ancient waters. Well, they're all kind of ancient, but yeah, you should definitely try it.
Yeah, I think that is, I mean, of course, there's tons of research out there, and it's a growing body about, nature connectedness and the benefits of, being outside. And we're talking to lots of people about that all the time. But yeah, this is kind of taking it to another level, because a lot of the time, I think we're exploring nature from our still kind of within some comfort zone, the comfort zone of, being warm and dry in our sweaters and our wellies and our rain gear, or maybe atop a kayak or something like that. But I have to say, even though I'm not originally from a cold water place, I identify a bit with this, because I know there's no outdoor activity I love more than swimming and just maybe snorkeling, like, looking through the goggles under the water. And just, I could identify with that feeling of just floating in the water. And then it's great that you combine it kind of with the physical activity of swimming too, which, I mean, whether you do it in a swimming pool or you do it in the middle of a beautiful lake, it's going to be good for you to go swimming. And then you just put on top of that the nature connection, and just seems like an awesome activity. What do you think? Do you have any idea why this might not be a common activity, or like, do you hear things from people why they're not so eager to go do this kind of stuff?
In the UK, it's like gone through the roof in popularity over coronavirus, because all of the
really, yeah.
So every single pool was shut. So all of the people who train, like triathletes and professional swimmers, they all started moving outside, because that was the only option. And I think, because they started off in the summer, if you keep it up, you don't notice the change in the temperature so much. But I remember when I was growing up, there was huge adverts about, like, don't swim here, you'll drown, you'll get pulled.
Really?
I remember what they were now. I'm sure they were probably about reservoirs and sponsored by, like, the water board and things like that. But generally, there was a fear about open water. Yeah, I remember that as a kid. But my mum used to be like a semi-professional diver at one point. So she had us swimming from dot. So by 2, we could swim properly. And we grew up on the coast, so we were always in the sea. But I remember even myself growing up thinking that when you look at a lake, they're quite daunting. They look black almost on the top because they just reflect the mountain. But I started taking a GoPro and filming underneath, and they're so blue and crystal clear. And people think things are going to trap them or pull them down. But if you take a GoPro and you swim, you'll see how it's so beautifully clear most of the places that you swim.
Interesting. I wonder why I have to look into that. Why were they so, don't go into the open water? This is what's it called? This is the fault of the Loch Ness monster, probably.
No, I think there were some places that people shouldn't swim, like reservoirs that were dangerous, but it kind of just stuck with you that, you shouldn't go in, you'll drown, they're deep, they're cold. It would always, but I think there's a few still knocking around. But I mean, obviously safety is really important, but if you kind of educate yourself and know where you're going and be as safe as possible, then you'll be fine.
Sure. It's like any kind of outdoor activity or outdoor venture that you might participate in. You got to be prepared. Do you sense that in your activity that you do, is there some kind of danger involved at any point in time? Or is there things that people should think about to be prepared to stay safe while going wild swimming?
Oh, it depends which water body you're going to go in. So I've never really had anything, but even the other day I was stupid and went off piste and decided randomly that after the school run I would go and check out this waterfall. But I only had wellies on, and it's a really remote one. And I ended up in the ravine climbing up it. And and you can't, you're going to go up or go down. So always wear if you're going for a hike, wear hiking gear, just because obviously you don't know what you're going to encounter. But with the sea, educate yourself on tides, rip currents. Try and swim on a slack tide if possible, which is an hour before high tide or after. With rivers, try and avoid swimming outdoors generally after really heavy rain for 48 hours because of pollution, and because if you throw a stick in and it's faster than you can walk or swim, then it's too fast. Always take somebody with you swimming. make sure people know where you are, for example. Yeah, there's lots of different tips. You can find them on our website. We've put lots of tips on there. And then we've got an Instagram channel called We Swim Wild. And we put every Tuesday, we put a set of tips on there that will help people if they want to start out cold water swimming.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely drop that link in the description of this show so everybody can go check it out. You know, speaking of which, you have this organization that you can tell us how long you've been working on this, but it's called We Swim Wild. So can you just give us a little synopsis of, you know, what this organization is all about and, you know, how did it get started?
So We Swim Wild is a non-profit organization that I founded with Dr. Christian Dunn, who's a scientist. And it's really about purposeful adventure. So we want to encourage people to go outside, but we want them to also at the same time protect wild waters. So we combine science with education, with outdoor like retreats and introduction to cold water swimming courses. But running through the thread of all that is the environment and trying to gather data, scientific data, so we can make real changes in the UK.
Amazing. So it sounds like it's a multifaceted organization, all kind of being, tied together with this thread of environmental activism, I guess we could say, which is really fantastic. I know one of the, you know, basics of this podcast is always trying to find how people can be active, like an activist, no matter what they're doing, whether they're a teacher or a swimmer or a doctor or a lawyer or something like that.
I found that there's a huge gap because people are doing great things in science, but that every day, you know, I don't often know about it, or most people don't know about it because there's not a kind of a bridge between the two. So the aim of ours is to sort of bring science into the everyday so people can take care of the places that they swim or that they visit.
Yeah. And do you have any examples of how you end up through your organization bringing science into like everyday life in people's activities? So
I started off by doing beach cleans in Snowdonia, called Snowdonia Beach Clean, and I started noticing all the smaller pieces of plastic. So from that, probably not answering your question, but from that,
that's great.
At the time, a few years ago, I kept hearing in the media that plastic never goes anywhere, you know, et cetera, et cetera. You probably heard the same things. And we just see smaller and smaller pieces that were clearly from back in the 60s, 70s, you know, the thicker, harder plastic. And I was thinking, what do they mean by this? Like, where is it going? So to highlight that like 70% obviously of plastic comes from terrestrial inland waterways, I decided to swim from Snowdon to the sea. But at the same time, I wanted to collect data or to find out what was actually in the water. Because if you've ever been to Snowdonia, the water is crystal clear, like drinking water. So It's like you grab a glass and drink it. So at the same time, a scientist had come out and published data that they'd found microplastics in all the lakes in the UK. And just by fluke of luck, really, the scientist happened to be Dr. Christian Dunn, who was at my local university. So that was an easy, you know, straight away I contacted him and he was really keen to test that water. So I took water samples in Avon Glaslyn and we found microplastics in the top of the waterway. And it looked like a glass of drinking water. You couldn't see it unless it had been run through the lights in the labs. And we found it at the source all the way through the waterway. And that's how it all began, really.
Wow.
Yeah. So now we have a project called the Waterloggers, where we have swimmers across the UK who are currently from October 31st till the end of this month. They're sending us water samples from any type of water in the UK that's natural. And we're going to map microplastics. So it's enabling people to protect the place they love and find out what's in it. And then we're going to use all of that data to lobby the UK government to start testing it as an emergent contaminant.
Wow, that's incredible. So this is huge. This is a huge study.
Yeah, I think I just answered your question. There's like a barrage of information.
Oh, this is what we like. We want as much information as we can get. How many, just so we get an idea of like the scope of this study. I mean, how many people are working on this and what areas?
We have 100. So we have them all the way up in the Shetland Islands, which is like the most northern tip, all the way down to Scilly. Over in Northern Ireland, we've got people in cities like London. We've got people in Isle of Skye, you know, like really remote areas. So all over, we're doing a complete random study of different types of water. So because we don't yet know, lots of people have done different studies, but we haven't mapped the levels in UK waters. So it's a complete study of that to give us a picture, the bigger picture, what's actually going on.
Interesting. So this sounds like a huge study. I mean, has there ever been a study like this done before?
No, it's the biggest citizen science project for microplastics in the UK. I don't know about the world, but definitely in the UK. And I don't think Christian realised how many we were going to get.
Amazing.
When I started, I thought it would be quite hard to get a few people on board, but it's been so popular. We've been turning people down just because it's self-funded and we have to obviously pay the postage and get volunteers in the labs when they're doing their PhD. So it's a big study.
Wow, this is that's pretty incredible. And like I didn't ask this before, so I'm just curious. So and what was your background? Like, what were you teaching? Were you involved in science before this all got started?
Well, my mum's an environmental scientist, and my brother and sister both did marine biology, but I went down the arts route. So I fine art and graphics. So I'm not at all, but it's been my passion as is wildlife, the environment, especially the ocean and the marine life. So I didn't as a career, but it's just always kind of been something that I'm most interested in.
It's in your genes.
Yeah, if you said something like 5 years ago, you'd be running a non-profit and it'd be swimming, I would have been like, no way. It just wasn't on my radar at all, actually.
But have you been with all of this, with this organization that you're running, have you been able to integrate the, more visual arts aspect to it also? Or?
We are looking at doing, so I haven't talked about the SourceToSea project, which is the national parks, but I'll talk about that in a minute, but we're hoping to do a fine art exhibition that fuses art with science to connect with people, our findings from that research. So yes, that is in the back burner, but coronavirus is holding us back at the moment. Yeah.
Speaking of which, how has coronavirus impacted this data research?
Okay, so the original
swimming in general, maybe
was that. So I swam the national park in Snowdonia and found microplastics, and then I wanted to swim all of the national parks in the UK, so all 15, to test the levels of microplastics from that down a complete waterway. So from the source, because normally at the source it's constantly moving, so they shouldn't be in the source. But if they're in the source, it's in the air and the precipitation. So we don't yet know the full effect of that on wildlife, on human health, on it's going to be like the asbestos, isn't it, of the 21st century?
Yeah.
So the plan was to swim all of the national parks. So I started on September the 1st. I swam Wales. I got ill in Pembrokeshire from cow slurry in the water. And then I swam Brecon in South Wales. And then I went up to Scotland and swam the Loch Lomond and the Trossachs. And then I swam the River Spey. And then straight after that, so that was, by the time I'd done that, was the end of September. And then England went into lockdown. So I was due to then go to Northumberland and North Yorkshire Moors, but all of that was in a local lockdown. And now, of course, England is in a month lockdown, and I'm over in Wales. So it's constantly hit and miss.
When you say you swam Wales, what does that mean? Like, did you swim every lake in Wales, or how does this work?
I swam one river from the source to the edge of the park, or to the mouth as it opens up into the sea. In every national park. So there's 3 national parks in Wales. There's 2 huge national parks in Scotland, which were the biggest. So I think the Spey was 175 kilometres. Basically, in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, we've done 550 kilometres. So we've got 450 kilometres to do in England. There's 10 national parks in England, but they're smaller. So they're much smaller. So, but just logistically to get around them all you can't really be doing that in coronavirus, can you? Going from one area to
Yeah, I guess not. It's interesting. I mean, everywhere is quite different. So is that how it is right now in the UK? You can't really traverse from one, province to another? Or?
Wales, England aren't allowed into Wales at the moment. But when we were doing it, it was that stupid business of local lockdown. So nobody knew what was going on. So it was a nightmare when you're on an adventure and you've got no phone signal, you're camping. But normally on an adventure, we'd like hitchhike back to the source. You couldn't do that because no one wants you in their car. Do you know what I mean? It affected us in lots of different ways that we didn't even think about. So just relying on things like the local bus in the River Spey, that was off because of coronavirus. Just things like that. You couldn't get around. You couldn't go to shops. You couldn't get media coverage to highlight it because in one hand they were saying you can't move around, and then they couldn't say here this one here is going around the whole of the UK. So that stopped it really, and we'll bring it back early next year.
Interesting. And yeah, was this like a continuous journey? Was this supposed to be a continuous journey, or is it kind of like you're going to different places on the weekend, or how does that work out?
I set aside 6 weeks, but it would probably have taken 2 months in reality to do. No, it's back. So it's absolutely knackering, I'm not going to lie. So yeah, so we'd swim one, drive to the next one, next morning, get up at dawn, start swimming and not stop until it was too dark to swim. Next day, the same. As soon as you'd finished that one, we drove up to Scotland. I did have to take a week out from the first one because I got gastroenteritis and they didn't know if I'd picked up any parasites because I'd swam up by, it's in a national park, so I just presumed they'd be really clean. But I didn't even think about agricultural runoff. And it's a dairy farm area on the Eastern Cleddau. And I think there's a 10-metre buffer zone, but if you've got sloping land and heavy rain, that's not gonna stop slurry running straight in. And it was tidal, so the tide was going out, but I was already in it. And this is not to put people off swimming. Normally, I would never swim in this. So you do your research beforehand.
It's just the real talk.
And the tide had gone out, so the banks that were left were like sinking banks of slurry. It was pretty gross, actually. And then, yeah, straight away I got in from it.
But this is, of course, this is like extreme wild swimming here. This is not probably the average.
Yeah, for fun. It was just like water quality. We were looking at microplastics, but actually the project so far has thrown up so many other issues with UK waters. And halfway through the study, it came out that the UK had one of the worst river water qualities in Europe. I think we were like 28 out of 30, which is like shocking.
Wow.
Why? So parts of the Brecon was like a putrid green. When I researched it, when I got home, that's from chicken farming. It's just so, like, I never, obviously Surfers Against Sewage, who I represent locally, they do a lot about human sewage, but I'd never even thought about agricultural. I don't know why it never occurred to me before, but I think there's a lot to answer for with agriculture and land use and water.
Yeah, wow. That brings up some very, very interesting issues because I think, there's the people and then there's the animals that the people farm, and they're creating a lot of poisonous stuff too, going straight into the water. I mean, that's a whole other study. That's a whole other study.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, okay, so you're doing this swim across all the national parks in the UK, and you're also, aside from the citizen scientists that you have in your network, you're also collecting samples as well as kind of doing a semi kind of promotional tour of this idea.
Yeah. So the National Park Study, the SourceToSea project, is to track a waterway from source to the sea. So that was the whole project for this year, but because the coronavirus stopped, they wanted to keep that study going. So we don't know what's going to happen with coronavirus, whether it goes off next year or whether it, I didn't want to stop the study and lose kind of what we're trying to do. So that's why I thought about having a citizen science project I thought if I can't get to these wild places, but people are going there every day for their exercise, then why don't I just get them to send me the water? And because I'm tracking a waterway from source to sea, I also wanted to, those are kind of our national parks are supposed to be our most protected areas. So it's like two different studies, really. So I'm looking at that so I could present to the government, look, this is what's in our most protected areas. But then also I wanted a complete map of the UK that can say, look, in this urban area, there's this much. In this remote island, there's this much. Because I think it's, because we can't see it, doesn't mean it's not there. It's like a silent contaminant. And I think it's really important that people understand that. And what this project has done, the Waterlogger project, enlisting the help of all these swimmers, is really bring home to people and swimmers what is in the water, because it does look clear. It does look like it's beautiful, but actually in there are such small, fine particles of microplastics that it's not as, it's not as clean as we think.
Yeah, I would be very curious, for example. I mean, of course, I think we can all assume that the water down in London is going to have a lot of stuff in it, but I'd be very curious to see what's happening up in like the Isle of Skye or something like that. Because I know that the study is just in process right now, but have you had any initial findings or any maybe surprises in the
first one that we did, the Snowdon one? From the top, but Snowdon's a popular mountain. It's the biggest mountain in Wales. So I started pretty much under Cribgoch. There's a big lake called Afon Glaslyn. Glaslyn and Llyn Glaslyn. I can't speak. So I swam from there down the waterway, and that's so crystal clear. Like you can see the bottom in the deepest part is so clear, and it's the cleanest one. And we really didn't think we were going to find any at the source. We thought we might find some lower down stream when we go through some villages. But a month after I did the swim, it came out that they'd found microplastics in the air at the Alps. So by the time the actual results came in, we knew that there was likely there was going to be microplastics in there. But we only found like a small sample, but because it's constantly moving, that water source, there shouldn't be any in there. So it's obviously coming from precipitation and rain. But there is not enough hard evidence that shows, people have done one-off studies and people are working on things, but there's not kind of a blanket study on this is how much is in the national parks, in through waterways, and this is how much is generally in UK waters at any one time. And that's what this study is about.
All right. So it's big, giant, comprehensive study. I love also that you're employing good old citizen scientists, because it's really, I think it's such a valuable use of, people's skills that might not be involved in like university systems or like big national government agencies, but we still just even the little people were able to go out there and collect data that's really important.
Places and want to protect them.
Yeah.
That they visit them pretty much every day, most of them. So I think if you can fuse people's passion for something and somewhere that they love, and then highlight that this is happening, and that's what kind of we're like bridging the gap between kind of people power and science, and then using people's power to like lobby the UK government then with that information to say, hey, this isn't good enough. We want them to start classing it as like they do for nitrates and phosphates as an emergent contaminant, because the strategy behind that of my thinking was if they do start classing it as an emergent contaminant, then they have to act on it. They can't just say, oh yes, it's a pollutant. They have to then do something about it. So that's the bigger, wider strategy of what we're trying to do.
Ooh, amazing. That's awesome. So this is, it's a whole, it's taking activism to a next level rather than just getting everybody in the community to like sign a petition or something, which is also helpful, but actually showing, hey, we've got people out there who actually care about these places, and they're kind of taking control over, we could say, like the means of production, which is typically reserved for people with high degrees or people that are like up in the stratosphere of the government, but just bringing it back down to the citizens is that's pretty radical, actually.
Well, we've done a lot of beach cleans, and they were really popular. We're getting like 80 people every time, just local beach. And my strategy was that we can't keep doing this. It's great for highlighting the issue to say to people, look, we're picking up this stuff, but the tap's still on, and it's just not a pointless exercise. It's great for, obviously every bit helps, but you can't keep cleaning up when it's still pouring out. So the point of this is to try and hit the big businesses or hit the authorities, the people who can make those changes and say, this is the data, you need to act on it. Because we had a bit of funding from Orca and Hydro Flask for the logistics of the SourceToSea project, but the rest of it's been completely self-funded, and because people are generally passionate about it. And I think that has got real legs to make a movement or to come about real change.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you so much for doing that, because like I say on this podcast all the time, we got to attack from all sides. You know what I mean? On the issues of environmental catastrophe, climate change, all this kind of stuff, water pollution, whatever it may be that is. And it's particularly great that, you can find whatever you're passionate about. If you're into swimming, okay, what's behind the swimming and what's behind the places that you go swimming in, whether it's the ocean or a lake somewhere, whatever's around you. There's a lot happening in there that we can do. Sometimes I think I used to do cleanups here too in Oslo. We'd go out into the forest and clean up a lot of stuff when the snow melts, and you find all this weird stuff from people's skis and all this stuff people have been doing during the winter time. Yeah. And I always thought, this is nice. It's great that we do this. It's great, especially for Instagram, and hopefully it influences other people to go out and maybe do that in their own neighborhood. But in many ways, it's also kind of, it's an activity itself, but it's almost like a gateway kind of for getting into maybe deeper things having to do with environmental conservation. So I'm also curious a little bit. So you were telling me a little bit before we started recording that there's also, a tourism component to the whole organization, and that is in part helping you fund some of these projects. And I'm particularly personally interested in this too, because I've been very much involved in tourism. And I think that a lot of people who are, one way or another involved in outdoor education or outdoor studies or adventure, yada, 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 all this good stuff that we love to do, end up kind of working somehow in the tourism industry, because it's kind of, brother and sister kind of destinations that people with these kind of skills can end up in. And, recently we've been talking a lot about on the show is that how you can use tourism as also a way to educate people, not just as this kind of, luxury piece of, offshoot of a good economy or something people can go relax. It's great. So, but you can actually use it in a way that you have a captive audience that's there. They're interested to listen to you and what you have to say and participate in whatever activity you're doing and can actually educate in that way too. So how does that work in your organization with the tourism component?
The tourism, so we do eco retreats and we also do like introduction to cold water swimming courses to enable people to have a safe access to these environments. So obviously I'm a lifeguard and got different qualifications to be able to do that. But it also enables us to do the where I said it's self-funded, the other research, it enabled us to do that as well. So yeah, we run those throughout the year. Obviously coronavirus has been hit and miss. We've just refunded the entire November calendar.
Wow. Okay.
Which is a bit of a hit. But yeah, so what we try and do is we do we keep it to small group sizes if we do groups or one-to-one. We also teach people how to be mindful of their environment because here in the UK, like huge swim groups have taken off. But so I've seen the damage myself locally when you get like 30 or 40 people trampling like a triple SI or going in with, so it's all about education. So people go to places like a triple SI, but they'll have like loads of perfume on or sunscreen, and they're really fragile kind of ecosystems. So our trips kind of educate people about that, but also how to be safe in the water, how to be mindful. So I'm a Hydro Flask who help us as well with sponsorship. I'm a Refill for Good advocate for them. So it's about also, getting people to stop thinking about single-use items, and try and pre-plan and take, on an adventure. It doesn't take 2 minutes to refill your bottle. Use a refill app rather than just use single-use items all the time. So yeah, it's kind of a mix really, but it kind of goes alongside what we do. So any profit from that obviously then goes back into helping us do any of the kind of citizen science or any of the research we want to do.
Amazing. So yeah, definitely create tourism with a purpose for sure. And I think it's really amazing. And I guess people know that are coming on your tours that they're helping fund this further research. And are the people that come on your tours, or is it people that have typically have experience with this already, or are they're kind of outdoors people, or is it, I don't know, or is it?
Most popular is our people who want to get into cold water swimming. Compared to, or they need, they want you to go and tell them how to do it safely. Mm-hmm. And you get a mix, and then people from, like in the summer, really popular people from London coming down who were really interested in our environmental work, who wanted to support. So they would come out for the day and we'd take them to, I'd take them on some of the secret swim spots that nobody else knows about as a local, So a mix really of different people and different things. But people either want to support what we're doing and want a nice day out, or people want to get into cold water, but they're a bit apprehensive about doing that.
Yeah, fantastic. That sounds great. I mean, everybody can feel good about that exchange, and everybody's learning something, and it's like an ever evolving process. What do you think about urban areas? I'm just thinking about access in general. People that don't necessarily have access to these really wild places. Have you seen any evidence in more like urban areas in the UK of people going wild swimming or cold water swimming?
There's been, especially this year. I think last year it started to boost the amount of swim groups, but this year with coronavirus, it's really taken off. So you'll see people swimming in really urban rivers, like the Thames is really popular. There's different ones in the Thames in London, and also urban areas. So if you're in London, you've got the Hampstead Ponds and kind of natural ponds from the Victorian times. I've seen a couple of swim groups really campaign to get the old Victorian tidal pools reinstated, that have crumbled away. So there are places, and there's definitely, you don't need to be on the coast or in the mountains to experience cold water. You can walk outside your house. My best thing to do is get an OS map and look for the pools of water, put a ring around them, do a little Google search on them, check they're safe or have the access to get in there, and head out for the day.
Oh, okay. So that it's available online in the UK and probably maybe in other places around the world where you can, find. That was my main concern, was that it may not be so easy for some people to access clean, like swimmable water.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Just in the UK, there's a map called the Wild Swim Map from Kate Root, and I think that's like a crowdsourced map where people across the UK can log on and see where other people have swum. And there's a couple of wild swim books now really taking off that like kind of list places. We don't do that. We don't tell people where to swim unless they're coming on a tour with us because of footfall and because these places are normally quite remote. And then once you've published a beautiful photo of a place, like that's it on everybody's bucket list. So like 1,000 people will come to it and it's not good for the environment. So we're kind of treading a fine balance really of we want people to experience these places, but we want people to have the skills to be able to kind of look up themselves and go with a small kind of cohort of people rather than this is great for Instagram. You can stand here in your swimming costume for a great photo and absolutely ruin the place. So
yeah, of course. And like we said before, there are some, you have to have some kind of preparations to be able to go out to these places. You got to hike out to these places. You got to know how to use a map. You have to know a lot of things. You can't just, wander out to some Instagram post. I want to grab a little bit of info before we leave today. For anybody listening out there, like, do you have any tips? If anybody's listening today, I'm asking for myself too, because it's supposed to be somewhat nice weather here in Oslo, and I want to try to go wild swimming tomorrow. Any top tips of just like, if you want to just go swim in your own backyard in the lake nearby or the fjord nearby, or what should people bring with them, or how should they prepare for a short wild swimming trip?
My nan always laughs when I say do wild swimming. She's just like, it's just swimming outside, because when they were kids, that you just go in the river, wouldn't you? There's no such thing as a pool. But at this time of year, I recommend boots and gloves because they're the first things that you go, because obviously all of your blood goes to your core. Your extremities kind of lose the heat first. So you can still wear a swimming costume, but gloves and boots will really help kind of the bite of the water.
Okay, swimming, but yeah, what do you usually wear when you go?
When I first started out, I'd buy 5mm gloves, and I didn't care if they were surf ones because my hands and feet would get really cold. Now I've sort of acclimatized. If you go all the time, you don't notice it as much. So I was in one yesterday and I didn't have any boots, or I was just still in a swimming costume. But if you're starting out and you've never done it before, you'll feel it a lot sooner. You'll feel the cold. So get some boots or gloves. Probably the thicker the better if you're worried about the cold, like 5mm ones.
You're talking about like wetsuit, like neoprene.
Yeah, gloves. Before you get in, don't hang around like getting yourself cold. You can warm up, do a little jig before you get in, but regulate your breath. So what you don't want to do is what most people do when they start off. When they get in, they sort of hyperventilate and go, oh my God, it's cold. You don't want to put your body into a shock response. So you just want to sort of like meditation when you go in, like regulate your breath, think like 1, 2, 3, breathe in and out. And as you're getting in, get up to your shoulders and kind of tread water for about 1 or 2 minutes. And that's when your body will acclimatize. So cold water shock happens when people dive in or jump in and suddenly submerge themselves in freezing cold water. So get in slowly, just walk in casually, regulate your breath, tread water, and then once you've got over the initial shock of the cold, you'll feel all right, and then you can start swimming.
All right. And is there a time limit, and is there a too cold?
I just do it on my temperature gauge. But yes, in the winter, at this time of year now, you need to be a bit more mindful. So go in for a couple of minutes. So normally people say when people start off, whatever the temperature of the water is, don't go over. So if it's 3 degrees, that's 3 minutes tops. If it's 3 degrees, like don't be a hero. What you're going to be mindful of, if you suddenly feel tropical, like it's so warm in here, I could stay in all day. That's the onset of hypothermia. So get out.
Oh.
So don't stay in that long. So, but to start with, do it gradually, going for a couple of minutes for a dip, get back out the next day, keep building it up. And once you can build up your time and you can stay in for much longer. If you want to stay in for quite a long time, wetsuit, I always wear a wetsuit if I'm doing proper swim training. For a challenge, I'll wear a wetsuit because, you just can't stay in as long with a swimming costume.
Yeah, so like full body, head to toe wetsuit.
Yeah, boots, like if I'm doing a long day, a few hours training, boots, gloves, the whole thing, the hat. If you're just going for a dip and you're worried about getting cold, you just stick a woolly hat on and your gloves and your swimming costume and go in, have a couple of minutes, get out. You'll feel great. Make sure you've got a hot drink and something sugary to eat to warm up your core when you get out. I always use like a dry robe, but you can get all different types. But to warm myself up, they're amazing against the wind. Yeah, definitely try it.
Awesome. Yeah, I saw some people in at least pictures on your website too wearing like woolly hats while they're swimming. Is this really a thing?
Yeah, well, if you're not swimming like front crawling it across the lake to do proper swim training, you're just going for a dip, keeps your heat escapes from your head, doesn't it? And so you can put your swim hat underneath and a woolly hat over, or just a woolly hat. Yeah, I think when I started out, I'm wearing it in hydrotherapy, but that's for a different reason. And that's because my hair's pretty much black. So when it's in water, the camera couldn't pick me up. So I had to wear a bright coloured hat so they could see me. But yeah, that's the kind of, in the UK, we're a bit eccentric over here, but that's what people wear, a woolly hat and swimming costume.
No, I mean, I even wear woolly hats in the summertime. So I was like, I'm all about the ridiculous, eccentric woolly hat wearing. So it sounds great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on. Can you just tell us again where people can find you?
Yeah, so we're We Swim Wild. So WeSwimWild.com, or on Instagram, we're at We Swim Wild, and my own account is Wild Welsh Swimmer.
Yeah, it's really great. There's lots of really fantastic pictures and videos, and I'm sure people can figure out how to get involved or support what you're doing. And I don't know, maybe you can even start something like this in your own country if you're listening abroad, all over the world.
In Europe, actually ask, like, are you doing this here? Are you doing this here? But yeah, people can definitely set up. So all of what we're doing is basically something I've come up with in my mind this year. So like, I think anyone can, if I can do it, anyone else, anyone can. And social media is a great tool to access, and get in touch with people that you would never normally bump into. So.
Amazing. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks everybody for tuning in today. Thanks to Laura Owen Sanderson for coming on the show. We Swim Wild. It is a great thing to do. And I think I'm going to go get my wetsuit and go swimming tomorrow right here in the Oslo Fjord. So I'll let you know how it goes.
You're freezing.
Welcome back, everyone, and thanks to Laura for sharing her story and for all of her efforts to get humans outside while advocating for the more than human world. And of course, you can find her work by visiting WeSwimWild.com or following Laura on Instagram at Wild Welsh Swimmer. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. We all got to attack from all sides. No matter what you're doing, do what you can to integrate healthy, sustainable, and environmentally aware actions for both yourself and the world around you in your daily life. Laura managed to do this by taking something that was life-saving, like cold water exposure, and turn it into something that was not only a passion, but turned it into something that was an action that creates positive change for others and the environment. All of our actions have consequences, and therefore, we are all activists. That being said, thanks for listening to us, everybody, and don't forget to follow us wherever you can and stay up to date on this podcast by subscribing. In fact, we have a new Instagram account up now, so you can follow us there at TransNaturalPod. And hey, send us some of your pictures of going outside. I know for about half the world right now, it's icy cold winter, but as we say here in the icy cold north, there's no bad weather, just bad clothes. So get outside this week, snap us some photos, tag us wherever you post them. That would be amazing. I would love to see that. All right, everybody. Until next time, get outside. See you later.